The fight that started it all. The underground fight club was loud, filled with the roars of alien creatures and the clash of fists. Bright lights shined down on the arena, where fighters from different planets battled for glory, money, or survival. Jake stood in the middle of the ring, rolling his shoulders. He wasn't here for fun. He needed money, and underground fights were the fastest way to get it. He had been fighting all his life, on Earth, in the military, and now on this distant space station. The announcer, a short alien with 4 eyes and a mechanical voice, shouted, "Next fight. Human versus Gorthak the Crusher." The crowd cheered as a massive alien stepped into the ring. Gorthak was nearly 7 feet tall, covered in thick, gray skin like stone. His 4 muscular arms flexed as he grinned at Jake. Jake sighed. Another overconfident brute. "Fight!" the announcer yelled. Gorthak charged forward, swinging his huge fists. Jake ducked under the first punch, stepped to the side, and dodged the second. The alien was strong, but he was slow. The crowd booed. They wanted blood, but Jake wasn't stupid. He had seen humans get crushed in fights like this. He had to be smart. Gorthak roared in frustration and swung again. This time, Jake saw an opening. He stepped in and punched the alien right in the jaw. A sickening crack filled the air. Gorthak's eyes rolled back, and he collapsed face first into the ground. Silence. For a moment, no one moved. The alien crowd had expected a long fight, maybe even a brutal beating. Instead, Jake had ended it with 1 punch. Then, the silence broke. Some aliens cheered, while others shouted in anger. Some had lost money betting against the human. Jake didn't care. He bent down, grabbed his winnings from Gorthak's belt, and turned to leave. But then, he felt it, a presence watching him. He looked up and saw her. A tall alien woman stood near the edge of the arena. Unlike the others, she was calm, her glowing yellow eyes locked onto him. Her skin was a deep blue, and her long black hair was tied back in braids. She wore a warrior's armor, decorated with sharp metal plates and golden symbols. She didn't cheer. She didn't boo. She just watched. Jake had seen her kind before. Zephyrians. They were one of the most feared warrior races in the galaxy. They didn't just fight for sport. They fought for honor, for blood, for dominance. Something about her made him uneasy. He had fought many aliens before, but none had stared at him like he was prey. Jake shook it off and walked toward the exit. He had his money. Time to get out. But as he stepped out of the arena, a strong hand grabbed his shoulder. He turned and saw her standing there. Up close, she was even taller than he thought, at least a foot taller than him. Her grip was firm, her expression unreadable. "You belong to me now," she said. Jake frowned. "Excuse me?" She tilted her head, studying him. "You defeated Gorthak in combat. That means you are strong. And in my culture, when a strong warrior proves themselves, they must fight the strongest of all. That is me." Jake crossed his arms. Not interested. She didn't blink. "Then you are my prisoner." Jake tensed. Around them, several armored warriors had appeared, standing in formation. Her soldiers, each of them carried weapons, ready to attack at her command. This was not a request. Jake clenched his fists. He had walked into this fight club thinking it was just another job, just another fight. But now he had made a mistake, a big mistake, and this alien warrior wasn't going to let him go. The alien warrior's claim. Jake's muscles tensed as he looked at the tall alien woman standing before him. The way she spoke, calm, certain, unshaken, made it clear she wasn't bluffing. Around them, her armored soldiers stood like statues, their weapons gleaming under the dim neon lights of the fight club's entrance. The distant roar of the crowd inside faded, leaving only the quiet hum of tension in the air. "You belong to me now." Her voice was smooth but carried an edge of command, like a general giving orders before battle. Jake clenched his jaw. Sorry, lady. I don't do the whole property thing. The woman's golden eyes narrowed slightly. You misunderstand. This is not about ownership. It is about strength. You defeated a warrior. That means you must now fight the strongest. She took a step closer, and Jake realized just how massive she was. Easily a foot taller, her muscles defined but not bulky, her movements precise like a trained predator. And that would be you, I'm guessing. Jake said, already knowing the answer. She nodded. I am Syra, first blade of the Zephyrian Dominion. In my culture, warriors do not win and walk away. They rise, or they fall. Jake exhaled slowly. He had heard of the Zephyrians. They weren't just warriors, they were conquerors. They ruled through battle, taking only the strongest into their ranks. The weak, they didn't get a second chance. And if I say no? He asked. Syra didn't hesitate. Then you are my prisoner. You will fight me one way or another. The only difference is whether you do it standing or on your knees. Jake's fingers twitched at his sides. His instincts screamed danger. He had been in enough bad situations to recognize when he was outnumbered, and this was definitely one of those times. He could try to run, but he wouldn't get far. He could fight, but he doubted he'd take down more than 2 or 3 of her soldiers before they swarmed him. For the first time in a long while, he was trapped. Jake sighed. Fine, I'll fight you, but not here. If I'm going to do this, we do it my way. Syra tilted her head slightly. You are in no position to make demands, human. Jake smirked. Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you wanted a fight, not an execution. Unless you're scared. A ripple of amusement flickered through her expression. A challenge. He had hit the right nerve. Very well, Syra said. You will have your fight, but do not mistake my patience for weakness. She turned and motioned to her soldiers. In an instant, they stepped aside, creating an open path. Follow. Jake hesitated. He could feel every eye on him. He was walking into the lion's den, and he knew it. But what choice did he have? With a deep breath, he followed Syra into the unknown. The arena of the Zephyrians. The transport ship rumbled as it carried them away from the fight club and toward the upper levels of the station. Through the viewing window, Jake saw the neon-lit cityscape fade, replaced by towering structures covered in Zephyrian banners, symbols of war and victory. They weren't just taking him to a random battleground. They were taking him to their arena. When they finally arrived, Jake stepped onto the platform and looked around. The arena was unlike anything he had seen before, an enormous circular coliseum filled with thousands of Zephyrians, all waiting for blood. The air vibrated with anticipation, deep drums pounding in rhythm with the heartbeat of the crowd. Syra stepped forward, standing at the center of the ring. Tonight, we test the human, she announced, her voice carrying across the entire stadium. He has proven himself against a lesser warrior. But can he face me? The crowd erupted in cheers. Some shouted for her to crush him. Others placed bets. Jake cracked his neck. He didn't know the rules of this fight, but one thing was clear. He had to win. Because losing meant more than just a defeat. It meant becoming her prisoner. Forever. Begin. Syra moved like a blur. Jake barely had time to react before she was on him. Her fist shot forward, and he twisted to the side just in time. The sheer force of the air displacement whipped past his face like a bullet. She was fast. Too fast. Jake didn't get a chance to counter before she kicked his legs out from under him. He hit the ground hard, rolling just as her fist slammed down where his head had been a second ago. The floor cracked beneath her strike. This wasn't like the Fight Club. This wasn't some brute swinging wildly. Syra was a warrior. A real one. Jake scrambled to his feet, already on the defensive. He had been in hundreds of fights, but something about this was different. The way she moved, the way she predicted his dodges. She was testing him, learning his reactions. She wasn't fighting to win. She was fighting to break him. Jake wiped blood from his lip and smirked. All right, my turn. He lunged forward, feinting a punch before twisting into a brutal elbow strike. For the first time, Tyra staggered. The crowd gasped. Jake saw her expression flicker. Surprise. No, something else. Amusement. She straightened, cracking her neck. Finally, she said. A real fight. Then she charged again. And Jake knew this time. She wasn't holding back. The unfair rematch. The crowd roared, their voices shaking the air like a thunderstorm. Every alien in the massive arena was on their feet, waiting for blood. They didn't just want a fight. They wanted a spectacle. Jake took a deep breath, rolling his shoulders as he faced Tyra. His body ached from their first exchange. His ribs throbbed where she had kicked him. His arms felt heavier than they should. And worst of all, Tyra wasn't even tired. She stood across from him, calm and composed. Her golden eyes burned with something between amusement and hunger, the hunger of a predator sizing up its prey. Jake knew that look. She was just getting started. The ground beneath them was smooth black stone, polished from years of battle. The arena was surrounded by massive walls, lined with hundreds of sharp weapons, banners of past victories, and the eerie glow of alien torches. This was her domain, and he was the fool who had walked into it. A deep drum echoed through the arena, silencing the crowd. It was the signal. The fight had begun. Jake barely had a second to react before Tyra moved. She shot forward like a bullet, covering the distance between them instantly. Jake twisted to the side, just in time to dodge her first strike. But he wasn't fast enough. Her elbow slammed into his side, sending him skidding across the arena floor. Pain exploded in his ribs. He gasped, trying to catch his breath. But Tyra was already on him. She didn't wait. She didn't hesitate. She swung down, aiming for his head. Jake threw himself backward, barely dodging her fist as it shattered the stone where he had just been. He scrambled to his feet, breathing hard. She was fast. Too fast. This wasn't just strength. This wasn't brute force. Tyra was trained. She fought with precision, reading his movements, adjusting her attacks in real time. She wasn't a mindless warrior. She was a master. Jake wiped blood from his mouth and grinned. Not bad, but I've seen worse. Tyra raised an eyebrow. Have you? Before he could react, she vanished. Jake's instincts screamed at him. He spun around just in time to see her coming from the side. Too late. Her knee drove into his stomach, lifting him off the ground. For a second, everything blurred. His lungs locked up. His vision swam. His body screamed in protest. Then he hit the ground, coughing, struggling to stay conscious. The crowd exploded with cheers. Tyra stood over him, looking down as if she were already picturing his defeat. You are strong, human, she said, but strength is not enough. Jake forced himself up, groaning. Yeah, he muttered. Then let's see what is. He lunged. This time, he didn't dodge. He didn't defend. He attacked. He feinted left, then swung his fist right into Tyra's jaw. The hit was solid. Her head snapped back. The crowd gasped. But she didn't fall. Instead, she smiled. Jake's stomach twisted. Tyra wiped her lip, where a small cut had formed. She looked at the blood on her fingertips, then at Jake. Her smile widened. Finally. Then she struck. Jake barely saw the punch coming. Her fist collided with his chest like a sledgehammer, sending him flying backward. He hit the ground hard, rolling to a stop near the edge of the arena. Everything hurt. Every breath was fire. He tried to stand, but Tyra was already there. She grabbed him by the throat, lifting him off the ground like he weighed nothing. Her golden eyes locked onto his. Do you see now? She whispered. You do not belong in this fight. Jake gritted his teeth. You talk too much. And then he headbutted her. Zyra stumbled. Jake fell to the ground, gasping for air. The crowd was in shock. No one had ever made Zyra move like that. Jake wiped the blood from his forehead and looked up at her. "You want to fight?" he said. "Then stop holding back." Zyra stared at him for a long moment. Then something changed. The playful amusement in her eyes was gone. Now she looked at him like he was an actual opponent. And that was when Jake knew this fight was only beginning. The drums sounded again. The crowd screamed. And Zyra charged. This time, she wasn't playing. Escape plan gone wrong. Jake hit the ground hard. His lungs burned, his muscles screamed, and his vision blurred. Every bone in his body felt like it had been slammed against a wall, because, in a way, they had. Zyra stood above him, completely unharmed. Her golden eyes studied him with something between satisfaction and disappointment. She had expected more. Jake coughed, trying to push himself up. "Stay down." Zyra said. It wasn't a request. It was an order. Jake gritted his teeth. Like hell. He forced himself to his feet, shaking from exhaustion. The crowd roared, half in shock, half in excitement. The human refused to break. Zyra exhaled, stepping forward. "You have fought well, but this is over." Jake didn't answer. He couldn't. His body was failing him. But he stood anyway, fists raised, staring her down. Zyra watched him for a long moment. Then, to his surprise, she nodded. "You are strong," she said. "Stronger than I expected. I will not kill you." Jake frowned. "Gee, thanks." The crowd booed in disappointment. They wanted blood. They wanted a victor. Zyra ignored them. She turned to her soldiers, standing along the edge of the arena. "Take him to the war chamber. He is ours now." Jake's stomach twisted. What? Before he could react, two massive Zyphirian warriors grabbed him. "Wait." A sharp pain hit the side of his neck. A small device. Then, everything went dark. The cage of the conquerors. Jake woke up in chains. His head throbbed, his body ached, and his arms were locked behind him in some kind of magnetic cuffs. The room around him was dimly lit, metallic and cold. A prison. No, not a prison. A war chamber. The Zyphirians didn't take prisoners. They took fighters, warriors. Those who survived their brutal trials were either recruited or enslaved. Jake exhaled, rolling his shoulders. Not happening. A door slid open with a hiss. Zyra entered. She was still in her armor, but her expression had changed. She wasn't looking at him like a defeated opponent anymore. She was looking at him like an investment. "You lasted longer than I expected," she said, stepping forward. "Few do." Jake gave her a weak smirk. "Glad to be special." Zyra tilted her head. "Do you understand what happens now?" Jake sighed. "You're going to tell me I belong to you, right?" "No." That surprised him. Zyra leaned down, leveling her golden gaze with his. "I am going to offer you something greater than freedom. I am going to offer you purpose." Jake frowned. "Yeah. And if I say no?" Zyra's expression didn't change. "Then you will rot in this chamber until your body fails you, or I will throw you back into the arena until someone else finishes what I did not." Jake's jaw tightened. He looked around the room. No exits. No weapons. No way out. He was trapped. He had two choices: fight for them, or die. Like hell. Zyra turned to leave. "You have one night to decide." Jake watched her go, his mind racing. One night. That was all the time he needed. Because he wasn't going to decide anything. He was going to escape. The escape plan. Hours passed. The only sound was the hum of distant machinery and the occasional footsteps of Zyphirian guards. Jake sat still, waiting, listening, calculating. His chains were strong, but they weren't perfect. They were made for Zyphirian prisoners. Their species was built for raw power. Jake wasn't as strong, But he was smarter. He twisted his wrists, feeling for weaknesses in the cuffs. After minutes of careful movement, he found it, a small gap in the magnetic lock. Jake smirked. He shifted his body, twisting his arm at an unnatural angle. Pain flared through his muscles, but he kept going. Then, click. The cuff loosened. Jake inhaled sharply, pushing through the pain. He worked on the second cuff, repeating the same process. Another click. He was free. Step 1. Complete. Now he had to get out. Jake moved to the door, pressing his ear against it. Footsteps. 2 guards outside. He needed a distraction. His eyes flicked across the room. There, a loose metal pipe along the floor. Perfect. Jake grabbed it, positioning himself against the wall. He took a deep breath. 1 shot. Make it count. The door slid open. The first guard stepped in. Jake swung. The metal pipe slammed into the alien's head, dropping him instantly. The second guard barely had time to react before Jake grabbed him, twisting his arm and yanking him forward. The alien stumbled. Jake drove his knee into its stomach, then smashed his fist into the back of its skull. The second guard collapsed. Jake exhaled. Step 2. Complete. Now, he needed to find a way off this ship. He grabbed a guard's wrist and pulled off a control panel attached to its armor. It was a keycard. Bingo! Jake slipped into the corridor, heart pounding. The ship was massive, filled with twisting hallways, metal doors, and alien symbols. He didn't have time to understand any of it. He just needed an exit. Alarms suddenly blared through the halls. "Damn it," Jake muttered. They knew. The chase was on. The unexpected bond. The alarm lights pulsed red as sirens howled through the massive Zypherian warship. Heavy boots pounded against the metal floors as guards rushed through the hallways, searching for their escaped prisoner. Jake sprinted through the corridors, his stolen keycard clutched tightly in his grip. His body still ached from the brutal fight with Xyra. But he ignored the pain. He had one goal: get out. He ducked around a corner, flattening himself against the cold metal wall. The echo of approaching guards rumbled through the halls. Jake took a deep breath, forcing his racing heart to slow. He needed to think. Where was the hangar? Where were the escape pods? This ship was a fortress. He couldn't just run forever. Then, from down the hall, a deep voice barked in order. Find him. Xyra wants him alive. Jake's jaw clenched. She wanted him alive. That was surprising. He had expected her to send an execution squad after him the moment she realized he escaped. A part of him wished she had. Because if she wanted him alive, it meant she still had plans for him. And Jake didn't like being part of anyone's plans. He pressed the stolen keycard against a door panel. It flashed red. Access denied. Damn it, he muttered under his breath. He didn't have time to try another door. The footsteps were getting closer. Then, an idea hit him. There was one way out, but it was a huge gamble. Jake spotted a ventilation shaft overhead. It was a tight fit, but he had squeezed into worse places before. He climbed onto a nearby console and pulled himself up, gritting his teeth against the pain. Just as he slid inside, the guards stormed into the hallway. Jake held his breath, staying perfectly still as the alien scanned the area. He couldn't have gone far, one of them growled. Check the lower levels, another said. Seal the hangar. He won't escape. Jake smirked. Watch me. He waited until their footsteps faded, then started crawling forward. The vents were massive compared to human designs, likely built for Zypherian engineers. That worked in his favor. He followed the maze of tunnels, taking every turn carefully. Then, after several agonizing minutes, he saw something through the metal grates below. A command center. And inside. Ira. Jake froze. His heartbeat thundered in his ears. She stood with her back to him, staring at a massive holographic map of the galaxy. Other Zypherian officers stood around her. Watching this, she traced a glowing red line across the map. Jake leaned closer, trying to listen. "We have the location," Zyra said, her voice calm but firm. "The War Council has approved the first strike. We move within the next cycle." The officers nodded, stepping away to carry out their orders. Jake frowned. A War Council. A first strike. What the hell were they planning? Then, before he could react, Zyra turned her head. Her golden eyes locked onto the vent, directly where Jake was hiding. For a second, time stood still. Jake didn't move. Zyra's expression didn't change. Then, slowly, she spoke. "Come out, human." Jake sighed. Busted. He punched the vent cover loose and dropped down, landing lightly on his feet. Two guards immediately drew their weapons, but Sarah raised a hand. "Leave us." The guards hesitated. "Commander." "Now." They obeyed, stepping out of the room and sealing the door behind them. Jake cracked his neck, shaking off the stiffness in his muscles. "Not gonna lie, I thought you'd have me shot the second I stepped in here." Zyra studied him, her gaze unreadable. "You are resourceful. I expected you to try something reckless." Jake shrugged. "Yeah, well, I don't like cages." She smirked. "Neither do I." That caught Jake off guard. He had expected threats, maybe another fight. But instead, she was amused. He glanced at the holographic map, still glowing in the air. "What is this? Some kind of invasion?" Zyra didn't answer immediately. Instead, she turned to the console and tapped a few buttons. The map shifted, zooming in on a single blue planet. Jake's blood ran cold. It was Earth. "You're planning an attack," he said, his voice low. Zyra nodded. "A necessary one." Jake took a step closer, his hands curling into fists. "Like hell it is." Zyra met his gaze. "We do not seek to destroy. We seek to unite. Humanity has proven itself capable, but you are fractured, divided. If we do not take control, another species will, and they will not be merciful." Jake's heart pounded. She actually believed that. "You think you're saving us?" he asked. "By invading?" Zyra tilted her head. "By leading." Jake exhaled, shaking his head. "I don't buy it." She stepped closer. "Then perhaps I should show you." Before he could react, she reached forward and pressed a device against his temple. Jake's vision exploded with images. A ruined battlefield. Humans and Zephyrians fighting side by side against towering alien monstrosities. Cities burning. Entire planets falling to an unseen enemy ***. Then, a future. A united force. Zephyrians and humans standing together, victorious. Then, the vision ended. Jake staggered back, gasping. What the hell was that?" Zyra watched him closely. "The future," she said. "One where we survive. Together." Jake's mind raced. Was this real? Was it propaganda? Or was she telling the truth? For the first time since this all began, he wasn't sure. The ultimate betrayal. Jake stood frozen, his mind still reeling from the vision Zyra had forced into his head. The images of destruction, the war, the fall of entire planets. It had felt so real. Too real. His breathing was heavy, his heart pounding against his ribs. Zyra watched him, her golden eyes calm but expectant. She wasn't pressuring him. She wasn't attacking. She was waiting for him to make a choice. Jake clenched his fists. His entire life, he had been told that freedom was everything. That no one had the right to take control of another people, another planet. But what if, just what if? Zyra was telling the truth. What if Earth really was in danger? What if she wasn't a conqueror, but a necessary force to prevent something worse? Jake exhaled sharply. No. He had seen enough wars, enough necessary invasions. They always started with words like unity, leadership, peace, but in the end, it was always about power. And Tyra. She had power. Too much of it. Jake took a step back. No deal. Syra's expression didn't change. She merely blinked. You refuse. Jake scoffed. I refuse to be part of whatever this is. He gestured to the holographic map, still glowing with the image of Earth. If you think humanity is weak, then you don't know us at all. Syra studied him, her gaze unreadable. Then she spoke, her voice calm, but sharp as a blade. I hoped you would see the truth, but I was prepared for this outcome. Jake barely had time to react before the floor beneath him pulsed with energy. A trap. Pain exploded through his body as electricity surged through the metal plating beneath his feet. He collapsed to his knees, his muscles locking up, his vision flashing white. He tried to move, to break free, but his limbs refused to obey. Syra stepped forward, staring down at him. Do you understand now, human? She said softly. This was never a choice. Jake gritted his teeth, his body shaking from the residual shock. You really think this is how you save people? He rasped. Syra didn't flinch. Yes. Jake let out a dry laugh. Then you're worse than I thought. The guards stormed in, weapons raised. 2 of them grabbed Jake's arms, lifting him off the ground. His muscles were still weak, his head spinning, but he forced himself to stay awake, to think. He had walked into this worship thinking he could escape, thinking he could outmaneuver them. But now he wasn't just a prisoner. He was a weapon. And Syra was going to use him. The programming chamber. The guards dragged Jake down the corridors, deeper into the heart of the worship. The walls became sleeker, the lights dimmer, the air colder. Jake wasn't afraid of pain. He had been through worse. But what scared him? He didn't know what was coming. Then the doors slid open, revealing the circular chamber filled with machinery. In the center was a large metallic chair, surrounded by glowing energy restraints. The walls were lined with massive, pulsing data screens, displaying symbols Jake didn't recognize. Jake's stomach twisted. He knew what this was. A mind conditioning chamber. He struggled against the guards, but his body was still weak from the electric shock. They forced him into the chair, locking his arms and legs into place. A mechanical voice echoed from the walls. Subject secured. Initiating neural interface. Jake's pulse skyrocketed. No. Syra stepped into the room, her gaze unwavering. You will fight for us, human, she said, one way or another. Jake thrashed against the restraints, but the chair pulsed with energy, pinning him down. A metal band lowered from above, locking around his head. A sharp sting pierced the back of his skull. Then, darkness. The war inside his mind. Jake's consciousness drifted through a sea of static. Images flashed in his brain. Memories, emotions, thoughts. But they weren't his. He saw battlefields he had never fought on, heard voices he had never known, felt loyalty to a people who weren't his own. The Zephyrian war code, their strategies, their purpose, it was all being poured into his mind like a flood. And worse, it felt right. Jake fought against it, forcing himself to remember who he was. His name, his home, Earth. He gritted his teeth. You won't take me. The voice of the machine whispered in his mind. You already belong to us. Jake's hands clenched. The weight of the programming tried to bury him. The visions of conquest, of unity, of surrender. But then, something changed. A flicker of resistance, a spark of rebellion. Because Jake wasn't just some soldier. He wasn't just another warrior to be broken. He was human. And humans, they don't follow orders. Jake pushed back. The neural link shattered. The machine let out a sharp, glitching noise. The energy restraints flickered, the power surging out of control. Sparks erupted from the data screens. The metal chair cracked beneath him. Jake let out a roar of effort and ripped his arms free. Then, boom. The entire chamber exploded. Aftermath. The turn of the tide. Jake's body hit the floor, Hard. Smoke filled the chamber, alarms blaring. He coughed, his mind still spinning from the battle inside his head. He wasn't sure how he did it, but somehow he had broken free. Zaira stood a few feet away, staring at him through the smoke. For the first time, she looked uncertain. Jake slowly pushed himself to his feet, panting. "Guess I'm not so easy to control, huh?" Zaira's jaw clenched. "Impossible." Jake smirked. "Welcome to humanity." The ship's alarm screamed. Sparks flew from the broken machinery. Guards would be here any second. Jake had one chance. He ran. Zaira didn't stop him. Not this time. Not after what she had just seen. Because now, she wasn't sure if she had found an enemy, or something far more dangerous. A wild card. A human who wouldn't kneel. And that terrified her. The final fight. The alarms were deafening. Red warning lights pulsed across the Zephyrian warship as emergency sirens blared through the halls. Jake sprinted through the twisting corridors, his breath sharp, his muscles burning. His body was battered, but he was free. For now. Behind him, the echoes of shouting guards grew closer. He had minutes, maybe seconds, before they caught up. His escape had been loud, and now the entire warship was on high alert. His eyes darted to the symbols along the walls, trying to decipher them. He needed to get to the hangar. If he could steal a ship, he had a chance. But first, he had to survive. Up ahead, the hallway split into two paths. Footsteps rumbled from the left. Jake skidded to a stop and bolted right, barely avoiding a squad of armored Zephyrians storming toward his last known location. His stolen keycard flashed red on every locked door. Damn it. They revoked access. His heart pounded. No way forward. No way back. Then, his gaze locked onto a vent cover just above him. He groaned. Not again. With a burst of energy, he leaped up, gripping the edges of the panel and yanking it free. He pulled himself inside, ignoring the pain shooting through his ribs. The moment his feet disappeared, the guard stormed past beneath him, completely unaware. Jake exhaled, resting his head against the cool metal. Close. Too close. But it wasn't over yet. The hunter in the dark. Jake crawled through the vent system, his mind racing. He had to find the main hangar bay. He had to get off this ship. But something felt wrong. The sirens had stopped. The guards weren't shouting anymore. The silence was worse. Then, boom. The entire vent shook. Jake braced himself as something heavy slammed into the metal behind him. What the hell was that? He turned his head, and his stomach dropped. Something was crawling toward him. Through the dim red emergency lights, he saw the shape, a Zephyrian hunter drone. Sleek, fast, armed. Its glowing eyes flickered as it locked onto him. Jake swore and scrambled forward. The drone lunged, its metal claws tearing through the vent walls. Too fast, too close. Jake's mind worked at full speed. If he fought, he'd die. If he kept running, it would catch him. He needed a third option. He spotted a vent grate ahead, too far to reach before the drone pounced. But if he could bait it, Jake stopped. The drone lunged, its claws reaching for him. At the last second, Jake dropped, letting his weight slam into the thin vent flooring. The metal gave way. He plummeted. The drone shot past him, missing its mark completely. It slammed into the opposite wall, embedding itself deep into the structure. Jake hit the ground hard, rolling to absorb the impact. His body screamed in protest, but he pushed through the pain. He had landed exactly where he needed to be. The hangar. Rows of Zephyrian ships lined the massive chamber, their engines pulsing softly in standby mode. Guards were everywhere, scanning the area for him. Jake hid behind a supply crate, his mind racing. One shot, one chance. Then he heard it. A slow, deliberate set of footsteps. He didn't need to turn to know who it was. Zaira. She stepped onto the platform above the hangar, looking down at her soldiers. Her voice was calm, but it cut through the air like a blade. Find him. The guards spread out, scanning every corner. Jake took a slow breath. It was time to end this. The final confrontation. Jake didn't run. Instead, he stepped out of cover. The guards snapped their weapons up immediately. But Sarah raised a hand. She wanted him alive. She turned, her golden eyes locking onto his. For a moment, they just stared at each other. "You should have stayed down," she said. Jake scoffed. "You should have known better." She exhaled, almost disappointed. "I offered you a future, Jake, a place among the strongest, and you rejected." Jake shook his head. "I reject you." The words hit her. For the first time, she didn't have an immediate response. Then she jumped. She landed in front of him with inhuman speed, her blade drawn. Jake barely dodged the first strike as her energy blade sliced through the air, missing his face by inches. She wasn't testing him anymore. She wasn't holding back. This was for real. Jake ducked under a second strike, pivoting on his foot and throwing a punch. Zyra blocked it effortlessly, twisting his arm and sending him to the ground. He rolled just as her blade stabbed into the floor where he had been. Too fast, too strong. But Jake wasn't out yet. As he rolled back, he grabbed a shock grenade from a fallen guard's belt and flung it at her. The blast sent her stumbling back, electricity surging through her armor. Jake didn't hesitate. He ran. The escape. He sprinted toward the nearest Zephyrian ship, slamming his stolen keycard against the access panel. Red light. Denied. Damn it. Behind him, Syra was already recovering. Jake's mind raced. He needed another way. Fast. Then he saw it. A Zephyrian fighter ship, half prepared for takeoff. Jake bolted toward it, vaulting over crates and dodging gunfire. He leaped onto the wing, his fingers gripping the edge as he hoisted himself into the cockpit. The controls were alien, but close enough to human tech that he recognized flight systems. Thyra roared in frustration, her voice shaking the hangar. Jake pressed every button that looked important. Engines roared to life. The fighter shook violently, warning signals flashing everywhere. Jake didn't care. He grabbed the flight stick, yanked it back. The ship launched. Zara lunged, but she was too late. The fighter blasted through the hangar doors, escaping into the void of space. Jake exhaled, staring at the stars ahead. He did it. He was free. But as he looked back at the warship behind him, his gut twisted. This wasn't over. Zyra had let him go once. She wouldn't make that mistake again. And next time, she wouldn't come to capture him. She'd come to kill him. Jake smirked, tightening his grip on the controls. Bring it on.